if someone puts down a piece of legislation, everybody wants to know whose it is before they decide whether to support it, right? That's how you know we've hit rock bottom. And so what I will tell you is what I learned along the way. Maybe, you go back to my childhood. So when I grew up in that small rural town, we were the only Indian family. And we weren't white enough to be white, we weren't black enough to be black. They didn't know who we were, what we were while we were there. But when I would get teased on the playground, my mom would always say, your job is not to show them how you're different. Your job is to show them how you're similar. And so it's amazing how that lesson on the playground played out throughout my life, whether it was in the corporate world, whether it was as governor, whether it was as ambassador, that if you first talk about what you have in common, people let their guard down. And then you can go and tackle the solution. So I'll give you an example. I don't know if y'all remember that horrific shooting we had in Charleston at Mother Emanuel Church. It was on the heels of Ferguson, where we had seen riots on TV constantly due to racism. We had 12 people do what so many people in South Carolina do on a Wednesday night. They went to Bible study. And on that day, someone else showed up. He didn't look like them, he didn't act like them, he didn't sound like them. They didn't call the cops. They didn't throw him out. But instead, they pulled up a chair and they prayed with him for an hour. And when they bowed their heads in that last prayer, he began to shoot. These were people like Ethel Lance, who she lost her daughter 2 years prior to breast cancer and had a broken heart. But she'd go around Mother Emanuel Church singing, one day at a time, sweet Jesus. That's all I ask of you. Give me the strength every day to do what I have to do. Our youngest victim, Tywanza Sanders, had just graduated college. But on that night, he stood in front of the murderer and shielded his 87-year-old great Aunt Susie and looked at the killer and said, you don't have to do this. We mean no harm to you. Or it was people like Cynthia Hurd, whose life motto was just to be kinder than necessary. That's who these people were. And when this happened, it was the first time we had a shooting in a place of worship. The national media flew in, like in an unbelievable mass, wanting to talk about racism, wanting to talk about guns, wanting to talk about death penalty. And I strong-armed them and said, we are not doing this right now. There will be a time and place we can talk about all those things. But right now we have 9 bodies we need to lay to rest. I didn't have that luxury because 2 days later, the killer's manifesto came out and he was draped in the Confederate flag. The Confederate flag is a very personal issue in South Carolina. It had been on the top of the State House, and then they had a compromise in 2000, and it put it right in front of the State House. I decided to ask for that flag to come down. I told my staff, I said, I want you to have 4 meetings for me first thing Monday morning. I want the Republican leadership, I want the Democrat leadership, I want the congressional delegation, and I want this set of community leaders. And I said, and don't tell them what it's about because I knew they wouldn't come. When I had those meetings, I said, look, at 3 o'clock today, I'm going to ask for the Confederate flag to come down. If you will join me, I will forever be grateful. And if you don't, I'll never let anyone know that you were in this room. I have kept my word on that. At 3 o'clock, I had my husband with me because I thought he was going to be the only one with me at 3 o'clock. I'm not going to lie. 3 o'clock, we had men, women, whites, blacks, Republicans, Democrats. Everybody showed up. It was a great thing. That was the easy part. To bring the Confederate flag down, it would require 2/3 vote of the House and 2/3 vote of the Senate, which is an almost impossible feat. I knew in South Carolina that half the state saw the Confederate flag as service and tradition and heritage. The other half of the state saw it as slavery and hate. My job wasn't to judge either side. My job was to get them to see the best of themselves and go forward and see what South Carolina could look like. And in the end, we didn't have riots, we had vigils. We didn't have protests, we had hugs. And we brought the Confederate flag down, and South Carolina showed the state, showed the country and the world what strength and grace look like. You have to bring out the best in people. We haven't had that in a long time. The tone at the top matters. But what I think leaders have forgotten is you're not meant to pass judgment on part of your people. That's not what you do. You listen, you know why they care what they care about, and you communicate in a way where you want to go and why they'll be better for it. That communication piece matters. And so, in what could have been another Ferguson, and blown up in a state that's in the South, we didn't have any of that. And we had multiple crisis issues like that, and we never had another. Another one was the shooting of Walter Scott. I don't know if you remember, he was an unarmed black man that was shot 7 times in the back by a dirty cop. And when this happened, again, this was 1 month prior to Mother Emanuel's shooting. And when this happened, I made 2 phone calls the second it happened, and it was playing all over national media everywhere. My first call was to the Walter Scott family. And I said, I don't know what happened, but I'm going to get you answers. My second call was to law enforcement. And I said, I don't know what happened, but I need answers. And a month later, to the day, South Carolina passed the first body camera bill in the country. And when I signed that bill, on one side of me was the Walter Scott family. And I looked at them and I said, never again will someone have to worry about a dirty cop not being held accountable. And to the right was law enforcement. And I said, never again will you have to worry that we don't have your back and that we don't protect the good ones. Those were 2 instances where South Carolina could have blown up. And those were 2 instances where we should have had, if it were today, tons of division. But I didn't judge people. I didn't pick a good side and a bad side. I just picked the right side to go forward. That's what's missing. Those are 2 long stories to tell you this can be done. But it's the tone at the top that matters more than anything else. And we need that in this country right now if we're ever going to go and heal.